She said working late for 19 months. One blue pill in her post told me everything. So I made sure the truth put itself to bed.
My name is Derek Callahan. 14 years of marriage, a colonial house with a wraparound porch in Fairfield County, two golden retrievers named Biscuit and Gravy. A wife who made every room feel warmer just by walking into it. I had built my entire identity around the life Sandra and I had constructed together, brick by careful brick, compromise by patient compromise. I coached youth baseball on Saturdays. I grilled steaks on Sundays. I was, by every measurable standard, a devoted husband who had given his best years to one woman without a single regret. That was before the Viagra. It started the way these things always start, not with a dramatic confrontation or a lipstick-stained collar, but with something embarrassingly mundane. Sandra had asked me to grab her pain relievers from her purse because she had a headache. That was the excuse, anyway. I remember thinking how ordinary that moment was as I unzipped the front pocket of her leather bag, the olive green one I'd bought her for our 10th anniversary in Florence. My fingers found the small orange prescription bottle immediately. I pulled it out, assuming it was ibuprofen. It was not ibuprofen. The label read a name I didn't recognize, but the pills themselves were unmistakable. Small, blue, diamond-shaped. I had seen enough commercials to know exactly what I was holding. And since I certainly hadn't prescribed them for myself, and Sandra had no medical reason to possess them, the math was devastatingly simple. My hands went cold. Not trembling, just cold, the way your body sometimes processes a catastrophic truth before your mind is willing to accept it. I put them back. I handed her the actual pain relievers I found beneath them. I watched her swallow them with a glass of water and smile at me from across the kitchen counter, and I smiled back. That smile cost me something I'll never fully calculate. For 3 days, I said nothing. I watched her instead. I became a student of my own wife, tracking the small inconsistencies I had previously dismissed as stress or distraction. The way she angled her phone screen away from me. The gym bag that came home smelling of perfume rather than sweat. The business trips that had grown from quarterly to monthly over the past year. Her colleague, a regional sales director whose name she mentioned with a practiced casualness that now felt rehearsed, had apparently become indispensable to her professional development. On the 4th day, I called a private investigator named Walt Greer, a retired Hartford detective who came recommended through a friend I trusted completely. Walt confirmed everything within a week. Photographs, hotel receipts, a reservation under her colleague's company card at the Marriott in Stamford, booked for the upcoming Thursday night following a conference that conveniently ended at noon. I thanked Walt, paid him in cash, and drove home in complete silence. What I did next, I will not pretend was rational. I will not dress it in the language of justice or empowerment. I was a man in agony doing something methodical because methodical was the only thing keeping me from falling completely apart. I went to a physician friend, someone who owed me a significant favor from years back, and I obtained a small supply of a fast-acting, non-harmful sedative, the kind used for minor procedural anxiety. Safe. Temporary. Rendering the recipient deeply unconscious for 4 to 6 hours with no lasting effects and, critically, no reliable memory of the period immediately before sleep. I swapped the Viagra pills with the sedatives, matched the count precisely, replaced the bottle exactly where I had found it in the olive green purse. Then I waited with a patience that frightened even me. Thursday arrived dressed as an ordinary morning. Sandra kissed me on the cheek before leaving, told me not to wait up, said the conference dinner always ran late. I nodded. I told her to drive safe. I watched her taillights disappear down our suburban street while Biscuit pressed his warm head against my knee as though he understood something I hadn't yet finished processing. I arrived at the Marriott 2 hours after she did. Walt had already confirmed the room number. I stood in the parking lot and watched through the lobby's glass exterior as they crossed the atrium together. Sandra and this man she had chosen over 14 years of my devotion. They were laughing. Genuinely, freely laughing, the way people laugh when they believe no consequences are watching. He had his hand pressed against the small of her back, familiar and possessive, and she leaned slightly into it. Something in my chest turned to concrete. I gave them 40 minutes. Then I rode the elevator to the 4th floor and stood quietly in the hallway outside room 412, listening. There was talking, brief laughter again, then silence. Then, after approximately 35 minutes, a heavy, distinctive thud. I knocked twice. Sandra opened the door in a hotel robe, her expression cycling from shock to horror in under a second. Behind her, her colleague was face down and completely motionless across the king-size bed, one arm hanging off the edge, snoring rhythmically with the boneless peace of the profoundly sedated. "Derek," she started. "Don't," I said quietly. "Not yet." I stepped inside and closed the door behind me, and I looked at my wife, of 14 years, standing barefoot on hotel carpet, and I understood with perfect clarity that the man who had coached youth baseball and grilled steaks and bought an olive green purse in Florence no longer existed. What came next would take considerably longer to explain. I did not yell. That is the part Sandra would later describe as the most terrifying aspect of the entire night. Not the unconscious man on the bed, not the swapped pills, not even the fact that I had clearly known and planned and executed every detail with surgical precision. What frightened her most was that I never once raised my voice. I stood in that hotel room with the calm of a man who had already grieved everything worth grieving, and I spoke to her the way a judge speaks to a courtroom, measured, final. Without the tremor of someone still hoping for a different outcome, I told her exactly what I knew. The photographs, the receipts, the pills, Walt Greer's name and how long he had been watching. I laid it all out chronologically, the way you present evidence when you want there to be absolutely no room for negotiation or reinterpretation. I watched her face move through denial, then calculation, then something that might have been genuine shame, though by that point I was no longer qualified to distinguish her real emotions from her performed ones. She asked me what I wanted. I told her I wanted 1 hour of complete honesty. No lawyers, no spin, no careful language designed to minimize. Just the truth, spoken plainly. In that room, while her companion slept off his unexpected evening, she owed me that much, I said. After 14 years, she owed me at least the dignity of the unvarnished facts. To her credit, she gave them to me. It had been 19 months. Not a reckless moment or a single terrible mistake, 19 deliberate, sustained months of a parallel life she had been quietly constructing while I coached baseball and grilled steaks and believed I was the luckiest man in Connecticut. She told me she hadn't planned for it to become what it became. She told me she still loved me, which was perhaps the cruelest thing she said all evening. She told me she didn't know how it had gotten this far, as though 19 months were something that simply happened to a person rather than something a person chose repeatedly every single day. I listened to all of it without interruption. When she finished, I told her the second part of what I had come to say. I had spent those 3 days of silence after finding the pills doing considerably more than hiring Walt Greer. I had also spent time with our family attorney, a sharp and unsentimental woman named Patricia Voss, who had been handling our estate planning for 6 years and who understood, when I called her that Monday morning, exactly what kind of appointment I needed. Connecticut is an equitable distribution state, but equitable does not mean equal, and documented evidence of marital misconduct, particularly the financial variety, carries meaningful weight in asset division proceedings. Sandra had, over the previous 19 months, used a joint credit card for 3 hotel stays, 11 dinners, and 2 weekend getaways that she had attributed to business expenses. Patricia had found every single transaction and flagged them with the quiet efficiency of someone who had done this many times before. I handed Sandra a manila envelope I had carried in my jacket's interior pocket all evening. Inside was a single document, a separation agreement, already drafted, already reviewed, already signed by me on every relevant line. It was not punitive by design, but it was precise. The house would sell. The proceeds would divide according to the documented financial misconduct clause Patricia had carefully constructed. Sandra's name would come off our joint accounts by Monday morning, regardless of whether she signed, because I had already spoken with our bank. She stared at the document for a long time. Behind her, her colleague shifted slightly in his sedated sleep and let out a long, slow breath. "You came here to end it," she said finally. It wasn't a question. "I came here," I said, "because I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed to know I hadn't built 14 years on something I imagined." I paused. I hadn't imagined it. That's what I needed to confirm. I left the hotel at 11:17. I know the exact time because I checked my phone in the elevator, a reflex, and the numbers burned themselves into my memory the way certain moments do when your life is quietly dividing itself into before and after. The drive home took 22 minutes. Biscuit and Gravy met me at the door, and I sat on the kitchen floor between them for a long time, with my back against the cabinets, both dogs pressed against me, and I allowed myself the one thing I had refused all evening. I am not ashamed of it. 14 years deserves at least that much. Sandra signed the agreement 4 days later. She and her colleague did not survive the exposure either, which I learned through mutual friends with the particular brand of hollow satisfaction that tastes nothing like the victory you imagined it would. He had a wife of his own in Westport, a woman I had never met, who apparently received an anonymous envelope of photographs roughly 12 hours after I left the Marriott that Thursday night. I will neither confirm nor deny the sender. The house sold in March. I kept Biscuit. Sandra took Gravy. That division, oddly, was the only part of the entire process that made me sit down and put my face in my hands. Not the asset split, not the attorneys, not the cold arithmetic of a dismantled life. Just the dogs. Just the fact that Biscuit would never again sleep beside Gravy on the kitchen floor, 2 golden shapes rising and falling in the dark, while Sandra and I breathed quietly upstairs, still foolishly believing we were safe. I live in a smaller place now, closer to the water. I still coach baseball on Saturdays. I grill steaks less often, but I'm learning slowly and without particular grace how to do it for one. Some nights, Biscuit sits by the door waiting for something that is not coming back. I understand exactly how he feels.
Revenge didn't heal me. I rather prefer losing her than losing the dogs. Some betrayals don't end dramatically. They just simply quietly empty you.